Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing more behavior and body language from James and Jennifer Crumbley. Both James and Jennifer Crumbley were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter in two separate trials. This was related to their son Ethan Crumbley, who committed the Oxford school shooting. Before we get started, a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to make sure you know that this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition, I wanted to let you know that I just got back from vacation, so the amount of videos I release will go back to normal very, very soon. Last thing before we get started is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. What we're going to be looking at today is their behavior and body language during their sentencing. They were ultimately sentenced to 10 to 15 years. Let's just jump right in. One thing you'll notice already, and obviously we've only watched a few seconds, but you'll see this throughout, there's really no interaction between Jennifer and James Crumbley. They don't really look at each other much. They don't make eye contact. They don't give each other looks or nods or smiles or anything like that. I don't know if they were instructed not to interact. I assume they weren't, but we really don't see much interaction between the two of them, which I think is interesting. Something that really stands out with Jennifer Crumbley is she resembles her son so much. Their emotional expression is fairly similar. Obviously, they're somewhat different, but it is fairly similar. They look alike. Their behavior is similar. She doesn't have a ton of overt emotional expression, which was seen on the trial, and she doesn't right here either.
Morning, you may be seated.
Now, you'll notice James Crumbley's leaning forward. Now, Jennifer Crumbley is here as well, but that does shift as we continue on. But you'll notice he literally scooted forward in his chair. He's more on the edge of his seat. I think that James Crumbley is far more likely to believe that if he is attentive, if he's connected, that he can have a positive influence on the way that this sentencing goes. I think he's trying to show that he's attentive. He's leaning forward, trying to be engaged. As we lean forward in our chairs, that is a way to show that we are engaged, that we are trying to connect. Just like when we lean back, that's a way to disconnect. So I think right here, he may be under the impression that he can have a positive impact on the sentencing if he behaves and connects in a certain way.
And I've been taking medication for the last 5 days. I feel fine. My doctor says I'm no longer contagious, but I have a lingering cough that is sure to annoy.
So you'll notice Jennifer Crumbley, she touches the middle of her glasses quite often. And this is a way to show nervousness. We adjust our glasses. We scratch our heads. We do these kinds of things to pacify ourselves. And she doesn't show a lot of emotion, but I imagine that she feels more anxiety than she may appear to.
I know this is an emotional day for everyone, and I want to say that I have... I want to ask first, Mr. Crumbley, can you hear?
I can.
Okay. All right. I want to make sure.
You'll notice when he said, "I can hear," raises his eyebrows. I talk about this oftentimes, trying to bring attention to his face. I think he wants to be compliant right now. I think he wants to be able to be pleasant. So as he's saying that, he wants to make sure that people understand, I'm listening, I'm paying attention.
I want to ask first, Mr. Crumbley, can you hear?
I can.
Okay. All right. I want to make sure. The court has reviewed the pre-sentence investigation with regard to each defendant and the sentencing memos provided.
So I skipped over the victim impact statements because it didn't show Jennifer or James Crumbley during them, but I highly, highly recommend that you go back and watch them if you haven't seen them. They're very powerful. I think they're very important, and I really highly recommend that you watch them, but they're just not part of this video.
I sit here today to express my deepest sorrow for the families of Hannah, Tate, Madison, Justin, and to all those affected on November 30th, 2021. The driving weight this has taken on my heart and soul cannot be expressed into words. Just as I know there is nothing I can say that's going to ease the pain and suffering of the victims and their families. I have taken countless nights of lament over the anguish and shame I carry, knowing what my son did, the harm he caused innocent lives, the families, and to the entire Oxford community.
One of the challenges when it comes to reading prepared statements, particularly when it comes to body language, is unless somebody feels really strongly about what they're reading, They don't show much because it's just words on a page. They're just expressing what has already been written. Now, sometimes we see that people are affected by that. We're really not seeing much effect based on what she's talking about so far.
I pray all the victims are the embodiment of God's mercy and peace, and that He heals your broken spirits. When I was on the stand, I was asked if I would have...
Now, just now you could hear her say, when I was on the stand, so there's some exasperation about her being on the stand. You can listen right here.
Spirits. When I was on the stand, I was asked if I would have done anything different. I was horrified to learn my answer I would not have was completely misunderstood. That answer is true because my son did seem so normal. I didn't have a reason to do anything different. This was not something I foresaw.
It's so interesting because I think most people were very critical of her saying that, and I still don't, at this point, understand how she's distinguishing the difference. She's still saying that she wouldn't have done anything different. She's saying that he was so normal. Why would she have seen any of these things? Let's listen to that again, and I'll keep going.
The answer is true because my son did seem so normal. I didn't have a reason to do anything different. This was not something I foresaw. That was the intention of my answer and how I interpreted the question.
So the intention of her answer was to say that I still don't have any responsibility because he seemed normal and I acted appropriately. That's exactly how I took it, so I'm not sure how people misconstrued it because she just explained it, I think, exactly how most people took it.
With the benefit of hindsight and the information I have now, my answer would be drastically different. If I even thought my son could be capable of crimes like these, things would have absolutely been different. Even worse, when I learned during the police investigation that he had been planning a school shooting before November 30th. He was not the son I woke up. He was not the son I knew when I woke up on November 30th. The Ethan I knew was a good, quiet kid. He loved his pets, family vacations. My husband and I used to say we had the perfect kid. I truly believed that, and that's who I saw and thought I knew.
So I'm really not trying to nitpick her statement, but when she says this, it is hard to forget the note that Ethan had written, that what they had gone and seen at the school, said blood everywhere, all of these things. It doesn't really add up with her defense. I mean, it's too late now because she's been found guilty regardless. But as she says this, it's so hard to follow her logic.
As the details started emerging during discovery, I was horrified to learn concerning behaviors my son was reported doing at school.
Now look at her eyebrows here. We raise our eyebrows when we have something important to say, when we want to emphasize something. Hers are staying up pretty much the whole time, so she does find this statement very important. She really does want people to hear everything she has to say about this, because she's pretty much leaving her eyebrows up.
As the details started emerging during discovery, I was horrified to learn concerning behaviors my son was reported doing at school. Refusing to take a makeup test he told us he took. Sleeping in class. Drawing pictures of guns on his assignments. Writing.
After she said drawing pictures of guns on his assignments, you'll notice she licks her teeth. Watch this right here.
Drawing pictures of guns on his assignments.
Must have been very hard for her to say that because that's a very soothing activity. We try to pacify ourselves when we lick our teeth or when we do things like that with our lips. So that was probably very, very challenging for her to say.
Writing, quote, my family is a mistake. Watching a video in class of a mass shooting that fatal day, along with internal communications that took place between his teachers and counselor, Mr. Hopkins. That he is, quote, on my radar, and, quote, he seems to be having a rough time, was never disclosed to us, his parents. The school claimed this was not abnormal behavior.
And there was her licking her lips after she said that. This is causing anxiety to say these things, probably because she feels so strongly about it. She wants people to hear these points and believe what she's saying.
That he is, quote, on my radar, and, quote, he seems to be having a rough time, was never disclosed to us.
See, she said it was never disclosed to us while she's looking at the judge. She wants to emphasize that this is not our faults, that they've got it wrong, that we weren't negligent here. We weren't given the information that we needed. So once again, it's not accepting responsibility for what's happened.
The school claimed this was not abnormal behavior because of the pandemic and Oxford being in a, quote, gun community. To say I was furious to learn this information is an understatement. This is not normal behavior to us and very different than what Ethan led us to believe was happening at school. Not only were you left in the dark about previous concerning behavior, but in the counselor's office that morning,
We were left in the dark about previous concerning behavior, continuing to pass the buck.
none of those previous issues were brought to our attention. I can't stop thinking, had they been, the conversation that morning would have been much different.
So she's using her time right now, rather than accepting responsibility, rather than acknowledging where she screwed up, she's continuing to blame other people, explain where other people faltered, how they could have done a better job, how they didn't know enough. So it's probably not advisable to use your time for something like this after you've been found guilty before sentencing, because it goes to show she really still doesn't accept her role in this.
That we would have taken a deep dive into what's really been going on with my son. I wonder if Hopkins and EJAC have those same regrets too. Instead, we are led to believe, not only from Hopkins and EJAC, but from Ethan as well, that this was an isolated event.
We were led to believe, continuing to make sure that nothing is on her, that if I had had more information, we would have done things differently, which grossly ignores so much of what was talked about during the trial. I won't get into all the specific details, but the idea that somehow they didn't know all of this and that this is all news to them and this is very unjust, it really is not consistent with what we saw during the trial.
We felt confident in trusting the professional's advice to let him stay in school that day. Quote, he does not pose a threat to himself or others. It was suggested that him being around peers would probably be good. We agreed. We were never asked to take him home that day. If that was discussed as the best course of action, we would have obliged. The prosecution keeps saying we didn't give them the big picture that morning at the counselor's office. But what they failed to acknowledge is the bigger picture the school did not give us.
And there's the teeth licking again. I think that this is bringing up a lot of feelings for her, even though she tends to be somebody who doesn't express a lot of emotion. She certainly seems to be feeling a lot right now.
I'm not the same person I was prior to November 30th, 2021. This tragedy has changed who I am and has taught me some very valuable lessons. It's said in suffering we gain wisdom. I've also gained God. In the quiet hours of my cell, I prayed to him about the deep impact this tragedy has had on the families and the endless pain no one should ever have to feel. For as God who holds a true understanding of our pain, I've also learned to depend on him for peace and strength. Alone, I'm not strong enough. I've learned that we cannot tell or predict what will happen to us in this life. One day you wake up and everything can change. We can, however, decide what happens in us, how we take it, what we do with it. And that's what really matters in the end. That's the test of living, is how we take the unimaginable, the tragedies, the raw hardships, and make them a thing of worth and beauty. I've also learned to think.
I think that it was a poor choice of words right there, taking tragedies and making them something of worth and beauty. I think there are certainly times and places where that can be an appropriate thing to say. I think being the parent of a school shooter, this is probably not the place you would want to say that. I don't want it to seem like I'm going to be critical no matter what she says, but I really think that her approach here with what she decided to ultimately say was maybe the wrong approach. Maybe it was not going to be the most sympathetic approach that she could have had if that's what she was looking for.
To never think this could not happen to you, and stereotype that bad kids come from bad parents. The prosecution has tried to mold us into the type of parents society wants to believe are so horrible only a school or mass shooter could be bred from. This is a very trivial assumption to have.
She's talking about a narrative that I haven't really heard so much. I haven't heard people saying so much that the parents are just so awful that they created a child that's a school shooter. I think it's more that they ignored a child who was suffering, that there was a child who needed help, and they did nothing to help, and aggressively went the other direction, in fact.
We were good parents. We were the average family. We weren't perfect, but we loved our son and each other tremendously. Everything we strived for was to make sure our son had the best life we could give him, to grow up with traditions and experiences we had, to be the best person he could be. I know we did our best. The love I have for our son, mixed with regret for not seeing what was ahead, weighs heavily on me. My point is, this could be any parent up here in my shoes. Ethan could be your child, could be your grandchild.
See, this could be any parent. This is trying to instill fear in people. You have made the wrong decision, because if your child acts out, you could be in my place, or you could be in my position. And I just don't think that's true. These parents were so unbelievably grossly negligent. This couldn't be any parent sitting up there. I don't think that the vast majority of parents would be in this position, given all of the circumstances that we saw during the trial. And I think that her attempt to try to equate their position with anybody and everybody out there is one that, once again, is not going to play in her favor. I don't think most people are going to look at that sympathetically or feel afraid that, oh no, this could be me next.
Child, your niece, your nephew, your brother, your sister. Your child can make a fatal decision, not just with the gun, but a knife, a vehicle, intentionally or unintentionally.
And now that I agree with. This truly, in my mind, is not all about guns. It could be a knife or a vehicle or something else. If he had used a car and driven through a bunch of people, or if he'd used a knife and committed the same kinds of acts, I still think, based on all available circumstances, the outcome of their trial would have been the same.
If there's anything the general public can take away from this, is that this could happen to you too.
Terrible, terrible message. Now, I don't know about you. This is not resonating with me. This does not seem like somebody who has learned their lesson, so to speak. This is basically a cautionary tale saying, look, you could all be in my position. It's meant to instill fear in people. And I don't really think that that's a great way to use your platform before sentencing, because she's basically trying to relitigate everything that she went through rather than acknowledging the faults that she had. She's basically saying, none of this was my fault. It was other people's faults. We didn't have enough information to have made different decisions. And this could be you next.
I don't cry enough, but alone I grieve. And if you were to look into me internally, you'd find I've died on the inside. I will be in my own internal prison for the rest of my life. Your Honor, I'm asking you to take consideration that I have been locked in a cell 23 hours a day, essentially in solitary confinement, for over 28 months. And that the court finds a fair and just sentence for me.
Thank you.
So my assessment of that statement was that it was not great. It was mostly tone deaf, and it really seemed to be more focused on the fact that she feels like people got it wrong, really, than it was about the victims or about the families of the victims.
An evil person, and the truth is, it's an effort to put her in a category of other, to say this is not something that could happen to any of us, and it is.
I continue to disagree with this. I do not think this is something that could or would happen to responsible parents. So the idea of this fear-mongering, this idea of this is going to happen to you or this could happen to you, I personally find kind of ridiculous.
It is something that could happen to any of us. And people fail to realize what the sentencing memo shows the court through numerous letters of support, that Mrs. Crumbly does have a kind heart. She does have compassion. She has spent night after night crying, not for only herself and her son, but also...
You know what, let's just skip on to James Crumbley and let's see what he has to say.
Before I address this court directly, I want to do something that I have never been able to do throughout this time until now. I want to say I can't imagine the pain and agony that for the families that have lost their children and what they're experiencing and what they're going through. As a parent, our biggest fear is losing our child or our children. And to lose a child is unimaginable. My heart is really broken.
You can see his shoulders go up, shaking his head. I really do think that he's trying to connect with what he's saying right now. Does that mean that it's the most sincere thing ever? Not necessarily, but I do think at least there's some degree of attempting to connect with the words that are coming out of his mouth with what he is trying to express. So I think in that sense, that's more positive than what we were seeing from Jennifer Crumbley.
My heart is really broken for everybody involved. I understand my words are not going to bring any comfort. I understand that they're not going to relieve any pain. and quite frankly, that you probably just don't believe me.
You see, he's moving one shoulder up like that. That shows some uncertainty. And I think that once again, he's connecting with what he's saying. Is that he's not sure that what he's saying is going to connect with people, or that they're going to really care about what he's saying, or that it's going to give any relief to anybody, which is probably true.
In pain, and quite frankly, that you probably just don't believe me. However, I really want the families of Madison Baldwin, Hannah St. Juliana, Tate Meyer, Mir, and Justin Schilling to know how truly sorry I am. How much I wish that I had known what was going on with him or what was going to happen. Because I absolutely would have done a lot of things differently. Again, my heart pours out to every single one of you. It really does.
So saying it really does go to show that based on their behavior, I'm sure that there's plenty of people that have doubts that he truly is affected by this, or that there is a lot of sincerity in what's being said. So I do think that at least shows that he is trying to think about how people see this and how they're feeling. He is trying to connect in some way.
Judge Matthews, I'm not gonna overdo a lot of things that were already said. But I know the full amount of pressure that you have on you and the responsibility that has been placed on you throughout this case. I have the utmost respect for you, and I'm simply going to ask that you sentence me in a fair and just way.
And he should probably stop here, because I think that that's a perfectly reasonable thing to ask, is to ask the judge to sentence in a fair and just way. However, let's keep going.
You presided over my trial and heard the evidence that was presented against me. You know that what my son did, I was not aware of, or that he was planning it, or that he obtained access to the firearms in my house. There was absolutely no evidence that suggested that.
So they already had a trial determining this. He was found guilty. So I don't think it's all that advisable personally for him to make this part of his statement, but it seems that they can't not say this.
But I want you to know I too grieve for everyone, as I have explained. For everyone that's been affected by what my son pled guilty to doing. And I'll continue to feel this pain for the rest of my life as well.
What my son pled guilty to doing. In other words, that's subtly implying that we're not responsible for this. My son pled guilty to it. He's the one that's responsible, not us.
If I could go back and change things, if I could go back and do things differently, and maybe none of us would be here today. So again, I ask Your Honor to impose a just and fair sentence based on the truth about what you heard during my trial. I'm asking the court to sentence me to time served and place me on probation for the maximum time allowed with the GPS tether for as long as the court deems necessary.
So he was very specific about what it is that he wants. He wants out.
I also want to address one last thing. And that's to what Tate Mears' dad said. It is time that we all know the truth.
All right, so he's taking an angry tone. Not a great idea given the context of everything that's been said, all of the allegations that were made about saying that he'd made threats and all of these kinds of things. This is not a good way to end something that is meant to sound compassionate, that's meant to sound like you're connecting with the victims. Bringing out what sounds like anger, just not a very good idea. Let's keep going.
That we all know the truth. We have been prohibited from telling the whole truth. The whole truth has not been told. And I'm with you, Mr. Muir. I too want the truth. Because you have not had it. You have not had the truth at all. The truth has not been presented to you. Thank you.
Not an advisable way to finish something that is meant to sound compassionate. He started off okay. He started off using his body language that seemed like he was trying to connect with people, seeming like he was trying to let everybody know, hey, I really feel bad about this. There were some fumbles throughout there, but then ending like this, not great. And so when we look at Jennifer Crumbley's and his statements, hers was basically saying, well, it's everybody else's fault that this happened. And his, there were moments that I think were fine, basically what you would expect from a statement like this, but to end in an aggressive tone, telling everybody they haven't heard the truth, sort of implying that maybe there's something about the trial that was unfair, probably not the optics that you want to finish off a statement like that.
I believe that the following sentences would be in the best interest of justice and are reasonable and proportionate to the seriousness of the matter and the circumstances surrounding each defendant. With regard to Jennifer Crumbley, it is the sentence of this court, Ms. Crumbley, that you serve 10 to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections. You will have credit for 858 days. State costs are $272. There's a crime victims' rights fee of $130. You and your agents may not have any contact with the families of Madison Baldwin, Tate.
So she's got 10 to 15 years and cannot contact the families.
As to defendant James Crumbley, it is the sentence of this court that you serve 10 to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections, that you receive credit for 858 days, that you pay state costs.
So basically he gets the same sentence, and the time he's already served is going to be taken off of that. So we'll go ahead and stop here. What we saw today was that Jennifer Crumbley certainly didn't appear to accept responsibility in this. And James Crumbley, while attempting to connect with the victims, also did not really seem to accept any responsibility. Not only that, he seemed to believe that everybody was misinformed, got aggressive at the end of his speech. So I think in a lot of ways, they really didn't do themselves any favors in the way that they presented themselves to the court today. So hopefully this has helped you understand some of the body language and the behaviors and the statements that we heard today. If you have any thoughts about this case, please let me know in the comments below. And if there are other cases you want me to analyze, I'm open to anything going on right now. I've got a couple that I'm going to be working on and I'll be releasing in the next couple of days. But if there are specific ones you want me to know about, please make sure you let me know. Last thing before we get finished up is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.